Welcome back to AM Agenda. A two-day-long cabinet meeting is kicking off in Canberra today, and we are expecting that Wayne Swan's banking reforms will be signed off on. The Treasurer will present a 5-point plan. The Age reports this morning that on bank switching, the Treasurer will want to announce broad goals, including meaning that people can change banks by just filling in a form and not having to go through the long drawn-out process that it is at the moment. Also, it's going to give more assistance to the smaller banks, building societies and credit unions. Mitch Fifield, from the hints we've got about what these reforms include, do you support them? A few of them seem similar to what Joe Hockey has been banging on about for a few weeks now.
Well, we'll have to see what constitutes Wayne Swan's 5-point plan. I must say I'm a little confused because Wayne Swan spent a long time saying that our banking system was fine, there was adequate competition, that if you were a consumer and you weren't happy, all you had to do was exit the bank, go down the street and find yourself a better deal. But what Australians knew is that it wasn't that easy to exit the bank and that if you went down the street you'd probably find exactly the same deal. So Joe Hockey for quite some time had been talking about the need to find ways to enhance competition. He was ridiculed when he started that discussion. He was ridiculed when he released his 9-point plan. All of a sudden, Joe Hockey is starting to look right on the money. There are things that government can do in the short term and the medium term. We've introduced a private members bill in relation to price signalling to give the ACCC better powers. But there are other things which government can do immediately, and the most important one of those to take upward pressure off interest rates is for the government to stop borrowing and to pay down the debt. We'll see if that is actually one of Wayne Swan's 5 points. I doubt that it will be.
Well, because that is a point that the opposition has been making some time, that it thinks there are these different pressures going on in terms of fiscal and monetary policy at the moment. Is that a concern that the government should be tackling when it does come to banks and clamping down on interest rates?
The so-called plan from Joe Hockey was a thought bubble. It wasn't a plan. It was a knee-jerk reaction to try and get some political advantage. We are not prepared just to get involved in knee-jerk reactions on the banking system. We want to make sure that what we do works well and what we do delivers for the Australian public. And that's why we've taken our time to analyse it, resisted the calls for a knee-jerk reaction, and when the points come out, I'm convinced that they will be in the best interest of all of the consumers in this country.
We are going to have to wait and see. It looks like Wayne Swan will be unveiling those reforms on Wednesday, so we will of course bring you all the details when we do get them. Of course, the federal government is also still at the moment grappling with how to deal with more Liberal premiers joining the COAG table. Of course, this is after the Victorian Liberal leader Ted Baillieu became the Premier there last week. We're also expecting Barry O'Farrell to soon become the Premier of New South Wales, if all of the pundits are right there. We spoke yesterday with Nicola Roxon, the Health Minister, on Australian Agenda, and she seemed to think that Ted Baillieu will come around to her health reforms and was pretty confident that she can work well with him. Have a listen.
I'm very confident that Mr Baillieu will take an open mind to this arrangement. No Premier wants to stand in the way of investments being made in their state, and we're looking forward to talking with them as soon as they are ready to do so.
But when we did speak with Barry O'Farrell on that program as well, he made it pretty clear that he's not going to be playing ball when it comes to giving up New South Wales GST portion. Have a listen.
The GST was a boon for the states because it's a growth tax. It helps our bottom line. To give it away through a COAG process without reference to the community, I think is just an abrogation of all fiscal responsibility.
Dave Cameron, when you listen to those comments and you take in mind the position that the WA Premier Colin Barnett has on this as well, it looks like the government is going to need to make some pretty serious changes to the health reforms on the table.
Well, I'm not sure it's the government that will have to make changes. I think some of the political rhetoric that's coming out at the moment just beggars belief. It's quite clear and unequivocal that the GST and the state's finances cannot ensure the investment that's required in beds, in doctors, in training, in technology, in the health system. And I think the national interest will win out, and both these premiers will have to understand that they can't afford to do the things that they will be promising their state constituents.
Mitch Fifield, would you really encourage your home state of Victoria to miss out on millions of dollars worth of hospital funding, of more hospital beds, etc.?
Well, firstly, Ashley, I noted that Doug referred to Barry O'Farrell and Ted Baillieu as both these premiers, so it's clear that Doug's already written off Christina Keneally in the New South Wales government, which I think is probably a wise thing.
Yeah.
Look, Ted Baillieu will do what is in the interests of Victoria. It was the Kennett Liberal government that introduced case mix funding, and that's one of the objectives of this national health reform that the government is seeking to introduce, is to introduce case mix funding throughout Australia. Well, we already have it in Victoria, so allowing the Commonwealth to hold back GST revenues from Victoria isn't going to bring into being something that isn't already there. Ted wants to take a very close look at this agreement. There are still a lot of details that are still being fleshed out by various COAG working parties. So Ted is going to take his time. He's going to make sure that Victoria gets a good deal, and if it's not, then I've got no doubt that Ted will seek to renegotiate, as he should.
Another big issue that we will be talking a lot about next year is, of course, putting a price on carbon. Julia Gillard said that 2011 is going to be all about deciding and delivering, especially on this issue. Yesterday we spoke to the Green Senator Christine Milne, and she was hoping that this is all going to be up and running and perhaps legislated by the middle of next year, bringing forward the timeline that a lot of analysts had been predicting. Have a listen.
Our time frame is as soon as possible, and clearly as soon as possible is after the Greens get balance of power next year. So we are working towards being able to deliver a carbon price mechanism by then.
Cameron, do you agree that the government is going to have to commit to much deeper cuts to emissions if A, it's going to get the Greens on side and they don't scuttle the plan like they did with the ETS, and B, to even have a decent impact on the environment?
Now, the government's got a clear position in terms of where it wants to head in terms of putting a price on carbon. We actually believe that the science, and we do believe that something has to be delivered to ensure the future generations have got a decent life. And what we are arguing, and arguing strongly, is that there has to be a balance in this. There has to be a balance between actually taking the steps in a pragmatic, real way, and the rhetoric that we hear from some that says you've got to shut down industry to deliver. Well, we're not about to shut down industry to deliver, but we are going to take the steps to ensure that future generations are protected from the worst aspects of climate change.
But deeper cuts, though, back to the question, is that something that you think the government is going to have to go for?
No, I'm not convinced of that at all, but this is a part of a negotiation that will take place between the Greens, and we would have liked the coalition to be there, because actually the coalition should stop the rhetoric and start taking some control within the coalition to stop the Barnaby Joyces run this nonsense line that it's just a big tax. It is about ensuring the future of this country, and the coalition should be playing a role, and if they played a role, the Greens wouldn't be the issue here.
Mitch Fifield, no doubt you want to respond to that, and also I want to raise an issue that it seems the coalition is grappling with at the moment, and that is looking at what sort of industrial relations policy you'll take to the next election, with some in your party arguing that you should really be embracing a policy that would call for changes to the government's Fair Work laws. What's your take on that?
Sure. Well, just on a price on carbon first. This government went to the election promising that there would not be a carbon tax. That's the very first promise that they broke after the election. Secondly, Doug, I think, may have already broken a second election commitment here. Doug said that further cuts will be discussed and possibly come out of negotiations with the Greens. So that's news on that score. But as we know, the government, the Labor government may be in power. Labor might be in office, but the Greens are in power. Coming to IR, Ashley, we said after the 2007 election that we recognised the verdict of the Australian people, that they had rejected work choices, and we declared that we would not seek to change IR law in this term of Parliament. Many in business said that there'd been a lot of change and they wanted to allow these changes to work their way through the system. However, what Labor have done is to set up a straw man that if at any point after the next election the coalition seeks to change IR legislation, that any change equals work choices. Well, it doesn't. There were many industrial relations changes which we introduced before work changes, such as Australian workplace agreements. They predate work choices. We will never walk away from the proposition that it's the right of any individual to sell their own labour on terms acceptable to them. We'll never walk away from that, and we'll never walk away from the fact that businesses should not be subject to unfair union interference and intervention. So, sure, we will have, no doubt, some changes to take to the next election.
Okay.
If unions said that there needed to be changes, if business said they did, of course we'd consider those.
Mitch Fifield, thank you for your time this morning. Doug Cameron, no doubt you want to have a very quick response to that. We are almost out of time. And I also want a one-word answer from you on the zombies question. You famously said that some of your colleagues are acting like zombies, parroting the party line all the time. Is that improving at all, or do you still hold that criticism?
Well, the brain has got great recuperative powers, and I think mine is going okay, actually. But in terms of Mitch Fifield's approach, this is just code, what he's talking about, to reintroduce work choices. And no one should be under any doubt that the Hawks, Rob and Hawkey and the Fifields and the coalition want work choices back, and they'll do whatever they can to cut wages, cut conditions, cut penalty rates, and really make it tough for workers out there.
That is the very reaction that Tony Abbott is worried about in terms of looking at this issue. Doug Cameron, thank you for your time this morning as well. That's all we do have time for. Thank you for your company. I'll see you again tomorrow morning. Until then, I'm Ashley Gillen.